these markets move. So if you're not in the communication, if you're not in that groove, you're not going to make it. It's critical. I see commodity pricing being weaker for some time. Yeah, I think there's going to be some pressures on agriculture. The consumer is unrealistic and isn't looking at science of food production either. At the time, I thought every farm's key to success was agronomy. And then years later, when I went to the trade side of the business, I thought every farm's key to success is marketing. And both are actually important.
There's things about it that you can't be taught. You have to experience, and you're going to go through highs and lows for 5 to 10 years before you really know your craft. Hi, I'm Trent Klarenbach, and today I'm speaking with David Nobbs, a longtime friend and founder and president of Harvest Grain Trading, specializing in specialty crops. Dave, how are you today?
Good, Trent. Thanks for asking me to do this. My favorite topic is me, so we'll see what we can learn here today.
Yeah, well, it's usually the topic we know the best, right? It's easy to talk about. So
you bet.
So the first thing I want to lead off with is, how many roommates did you have in university?
Oh, I think like 40. It was a long ordeal, 7 years, and plus some time in Calgary in the summer and Regina, and it might be 50. I thought about writing them down one time, but I've actually forgot some of the names even.
Yeah.
It was quite an ordeal. I mean, in 88, I graduated from high school. We met in the fall of 89.
Yeah.
And, at that time I was just, I wanted to farm. That's what I was set out to do. And so I went to the VOCAG at the U of S, kind of the same as my dad had done. And, by 91, when I graduated from that, the bottom had pretty much completely fallen out of agriculture. And my dad encouraged me to stay in university. I think he would have encouraged me to be a little more studious than I was, but encouraged me to stay there. And then I started working in the ag chem industry in the summers, and got a real interest in agronomy, and and that career kind of led me to where I am today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not have interest in farming until I became your roommate in university.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't really on the cards for me, and for a variety of reasons, one of which was the bottom had fallen out, during that period of time. That was one of the reasons. And and then I got the bug, actually, that when I was rooming with you, and of course the different guys that came through that place, and our buddies, right? It was a hot topic. So yeah, that's the way it started. So yeah, you from prior to university, you grew up where?
So Lancer. I was born here in Saskatoon, and I was adopted by my parents, Laverne and Beth Nobbs, and moved out to Lancer at a young age, obviously, and really developed a love of agriculture. And we had a 2,000 acre farm, and we were seeding with diskers, and it was durum on summer fallow. And it was that way in 88 pretty much, when I left and went to university.
Yeah, 88 was a bad year.
Yeah, 88 was a horrible year. Financially, it didn't seem to matter because we were young.
Yeah.
But
no idea. Yeah.
No idea about the background, on the finances or anything. But, that was a very interesting time, because I think 88 really pushed us into chem fallow, which pushed us into direct seeding, which pushed us into longer rotations with special crops and legumes. And so there's a lot of real formative stuff in that time frame that came out of that 88 drought. So yeah, it was an interesting time.
Yeah, I was shielded from what was going on, on the finance side of things. I'd really had no idea, which I guess that's the role of the parents, right? And pretty hard to comprehend. But I tell this story, and even when I think back, it's hard to imagine it happened. But I remember, I think it was 88. It blew so bad in the newly seeded crop with the diskers by the yard, and I swear on a stack of Bibles that it blew down to the moisture.
Right.
Like I swear it did, and that's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, diskers were a conservation piece of equipment in some sense, because you'd flip all the wet soil up and stop the erosion.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, that was the role of a disker in a sense. Yeah. And I remember drifts in the ditches like snowbanks, and I mean, we still have those ridges, in parts of our farm that we fight with when cutting lentils or something. But no, that was an incredibly formative year, I think, in my life. And we had one crop. We were selling it to the Canadian Wheat Board.
Yeah.
And they were controlling our cash flows. And all of these are reasons why. And we had the American Farm Bill. So the American growers were subsidized. And on top of that, we had the Canadian Wheat Board restricting our ability to sell grain, right? So there was two major things there that had happened. And, it was a tough period. When I look back, I'm not sure how families made it. Right?
Yeah. A lot of resilience there that I think that resilience is being lost.
Right.
I don't think you and I, or maybe our generation, has it, and I don't think the one coming up has it.
Right.
They just haven't had those tough times yet.
Right. Yeah.
It's tough, but it's not.
Yeah.
That was, you put wet cloths around your windowsills and underneath the doors to keep the dust out of your house, right? Like it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole wheat board thing, right? I often said that Canadian Wheat Board was responsible for more farmers leaving agriculture than drought and grasshoppers combined.
Right. And I grew up in a very anti-Canadian Wheat Board house. My dad was the director of the Western Canadian Wheat Growers. And, when I came out in 96, that board out of college in 96, that Canadian Wheat Board was still in place for another 15 years.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we had to find crops that allowed us to work around the board. And that's how I got so interested in canary seed production and trading and exports and really pushed me to where I am in my career today.
Yeah, that's interesting. You and I have had a lot of discussions about this, and, we had our influences. So around our house, we had the Western Producer, but we also had the Grain News that came every week.
Yeah.
And the Grain News, I really leaned towards that. My father, too, was against the wheat board monopoly. And we had some influences from Raymond Somerville to Reinhold Nunwaller down the road with Allstate Grain. And Morris Nunwaller, the conversations, anti-wheat board, the Cook family, anti-wheat board discussions were pretty prevalent also. Yeah. But yeah, so when you and I started farming, what, mid-90s?
96-ish, 95, 96.
I think that's when I started too. And I remember it being a struggle trying to find a crop that was going to show a profit and or cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah, and the internet was just, I managed to get through my entire college career, 7 years, without typing a single paper up. I didn't know how to use a computer. I remember I went to my first sales meeting as a chem rep in 96, and I actually checked my laptop bag. And I can still remember standing there with the sales manager and seeing my laptop bag come down the down the bag carriage thing in Winnipeg when we landed. Yeah. And I was not a computer guy. I didn't, you were an ag ector kind of numbers guy. And so you were more interested in using a computer, and I had no interest at all. But the internet had come along, and all of a sudden we were able to look at chemicals being used on chickpeas in Australia or, different crops. We both grew lentils. I started with Kabuli chickpeas, and I was working with Gustafson seed treatments and selling Vitavax, but we just had Apron registered right as I came out of college. And I'd worked with them in the summers, and Metalaxyl or Apron is required for Kabuli chickpea germination, right? So I got very heavily involved in custom seed treating and setting up applicators at all these little special crop facilities across the West. And I met Lloyd Affleck, who you had met at the time. And he got me really interested in production of chickpeas, which, was partly my job. But on our farm, he encouraged me to grow chickpeas. And then, we started, I remember, with 80 acres of Kabuli chickpeas, and we made I'm guessing, but maybe $400 an acre, which was just huge money at the time. And I thought, wow, this is super easy. And then I and we had to sort out the marketing. We were talking about the ounce testing and the way they
sizing, the 7 millimeters,
7 versus the imperial and metric sizing, and the counts, Spanish counts, do they call it? I can't even remember. Yeah. It's not really used anymore.
The screens were 56s or 60s or something versus the 7 mils or something.
I kind of forget a lot of it. And funny, I spent almost 25 years trading special crops, but chickpeas I've hardly ever traded. I've done very little experience in the chickpea market. It's more focused on lentils and canary, but that's all we lived to do back then, was trying to sort all these things out. And the Canadian industry didn't really know it either, because they hadn't marketed chickpeas either, right? And I remember looking at the apron numbers, my sales for apron, and I thought, you know what, I can calculate the actual acreage of this crop.
Oh yeah.
That was another thing that I've carried with me through my career, is finding those indicators of acreage and production and trying to understand where these markets are headed. So yeah, it was an interesting time.
I'll just circle around back to the chickpeas again. You introduced chickpeas and encouraged Chris and I to grow them also. So we grew them on our place. I think my brother and I grew 80 acres again. I think father grew 80 acres. I don't know how many, whatever Chris did, but we had the first year was a great crop.
Yeah.
And then what happened the second year?
The second year.
You had early frost.
That was the third year.
Third year?
So the second year.
I think I lost $100 an acre on them, but I doubled down.
Well, so in the second year, we did so good on the Kabuli chickpeas. My dad said, he kind of almost turned things over to me and said, okay, well, you see what you want to do here. And so I said, okay, we're going to grow Wero maple peas. Another formative moment of my career. We seed these Wero maple peas, and literally that was the earliest variety of maples that we were growing, that I know we were growing. And they would grow 6 feet tall and they'd lay down flat. The market was at like $18 a bushel the year before. And I thought, I'm going to grow these in the south, and I'm going to harvest them early, and I'm going to get them to market before everybody else. Well, the market realized that there was a huge amount of expansion of acreage that year, and the price went to $4. And so we kept those maple peas for 2 years and sold them at $6, right? Wow. So, I think about that all the time, because that was something that I got in my head as a grower and didn't really understand that the market is always kind of anticipating, thinking ahead, and it's pretty hard to beat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember those green chickpeas? We went.
I think that was the next year, but
was it okay? See, this is my memory. I don't remember.
Yeah. So yeah, it
was years. I thought it was the second
50% frozen, and there was no pet food market in the U.S. to buy the frozen product. There was, it was just waste. It was hog food, right?
We had a foray into the color sorting business.
Yeah. We bought into a color sorting company. And that just kind of went nowhere, but
it was an experience. A lot of work on Lloyd's part. But.
And the color sorting, I've always found that, and I still see people look at their production this way, as they say, well, if only I could upgrade it. And you see people that had poor quality lentils last year, spent a bunch of time this winter trying to set up a color sorting system, but the market fell 20 cents a pound by the time they got their system set up, right? Yeah. Right. So, sometimes you're better off just taking your lumps and moving on, we had to invest in a system to learn that, I suppose. But
we were 6 months too late, probably.
Yeah. So managed to get out of that without losing a bunch of money by the grace of God. But
it was a good experience. So.
Yeah. There's another one for the books, right? So
you brought it up earlier before we started taping here or filming, but so the internet came out. So Dave and I went to university. I didn't know what the internet was. My buddy Rick was in engineering. He had some friend who went to MIT, was sending these messages through the computer. I grew up on an Apple IIe. I was aware of some of this stuff going, but I didn't really understand any of it. In university, I just got, outside the Mac lab and the IBM lab, the Ag department, we didn't use them, right? But they're sending these messages. I didn't know what it was. And then got out of university and then, became aware of the internet.
Yeah.
And I remember spending $3,300 on a Dell computer.
I remember that computer, actually.
And that was a big old monitor on it. And it was a 486 or some it was a Pent. I forget what it was, but it was expensive. I've never spent that much on a computer since then. But,
yeah.
And then, and so Yeah, you brought it up, and the research we used to do into trying to find a crop to grow that was going to either cash flow or return a profit.
Yeah.
And the internet was slow, like 28.8K, and it was 56, that was lightning speed. When I just recently moved here a couple of years ago, my wife initiated a purge in my life. So I tend to collect things. I had these binders, number of 3-ring binders, 2 and 3 ring, 2 and 3 inch binders of just of data from different crops that I would painstakingly print off on a slow printer off the slow internet, trying to and document this, thinking I might need to learn how to grow cassava at some point because someone in North Dakota was doing that. Right?
Yeah, you thought that you maybe wouldn't find that website ever again, so you got to print it off, stick it in a binder, and yeah, I had this. I was doing the same things, yeah. And but we did hit on a few things. I mean, coriander became about a third of our production on our farm for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
and that really worked well.
Yeah.
And it was top 2 for profit every year I grew that crop.
Yeah.
I remember we had 100 bushel coriander crop in 2004. So this is 8 or so years after kind of coming out of college. And the neighbors were over helping us, and they filled the Super Bee full of this stuff, which is about 2,200 bushels. And then they went to a 1,600 bushel bin and started dumping it in the bin, and then bam, snap off the shear pin. Oh, yeah. Because the load wouldn't actually fit in the bin. And then they would go back to the field, fill it up again. It was coming off so fast.
Yeah. And
they'd do the same thing again. And they were like, these Super Bees hold more grain than our bin does, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, it took couple years to sell all that product, right? It was a small niche market.
Yeah. Yeah, it was only a few buyers. It was a main crop from myself. Also, it was consistently the one crop that would produce a profit.
Yeah.
And it was the only profit, and it was a fairly healthy profit.
Yeah.
But it had to offset everything else, right? But it was, stuff with bushel. That was a great experience, really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, coriander was a really interesting crop. I mean, once I went to Canpulse, after my Gustafson Chem days, we started marketing some of that to Mexico and Europe and different places. And yeah, it was a niche crop. And then we get into 07, 08, and the ethanol boom hits. And then kind of rising tide lifted all boats. And then a guy started to drop some of these really super niche things and focus on stuff that, just had better market opportunities, right? And that's where we dropped that crop. We also tried anise. Did you try that?
I got a bag from you, but I never ended up seeding it.
Right.
I didn't get my act in order that year.
Yeah, it came on the bus. I think I got bags of seed on the bus out of Manitoba. And we had a bin smelled like black licorice for a decade after, and we ended up burning that stuff. It was a 140-day to maturity crop, and it didn't fly. So there's some successes and failures along the way. So.
Yeah, but you got to try, right?
Yeah,
and that's what I was trying everything to the same as you. Just there's what can I grow here, and and.
Caraway and dill and
did you get into that stuff? Caraway and
dill? We didn't. But a neighbor did grow some dill, but we never did. The problem with some of these crops, and I see this even with, still in my career today, like black beluga lentils, right? Like, if I had 200 tons, and this happened to me a couple of years ago, I bought 200 tons and took me 8 months to sell the stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just so niche. And when you start moving, I'm really, in my current role, more of an export trader, and I'm not a food guy. And you have to be more of a food guy in some of these really super niche crops, right? And it's just not kind of who I am.
Well, yeah, you brought up the liquidity of the crops, and coriander was obviously a significant crop for both of us at one time, and a handful of buyers.
Yeah.
And
3.
Yeah.
3 in Canada, I think, at the time,
3
right?
in Canada.
Yeah.
Like I remember had all, I was undercapitalized and was totally undercapitalized. And I remember, had everything planned out to sell this stuff for spring, so I could have some money for seeding, right? And the buyer was gone to Cuba, right?
Right.
and it was panic time. He was great to deal with after that, but like there just wasn't any options.
Right.
So you really, those niche crops, if you need a little bit of room to be able to work with them, I think, because if you rely on them as a pivotal or important part of your business, it can be difficult. So. Yeah.
But I think, and I think so. I think that's one of the things we took home was from that period was you still have to have crops you can sell and market and turn into cash, right? Yeah. And so that that's where I dropped some of that kind of innovative stuff that we were doing, and shifted into some different crops that just have more demand and more volumes, and I couldn't even tell you how much coriander is produced anymore in the province. I was, very tuned into that at the time, but
I've seen very few crops in the last 15 years.
Yeah. There's nothing nicer than a flowering coriander field though, right?
I like it. It's beautiful. I love the smell of it.
It's a neat crop.
Neighbors didn't appreciate it as much as I did. But, that's the way it works. Yeah. So, okay. So you went to university, you and I graduated in mid-90s. I went back home, did transportation, eventually farming. What was your path after that?
Well, so I was farming and working for Gustafson's. So, and I got very kind of focused on special crop production, chickpeas, lentils, peas, and the seed treatments required for those crops, right? So became a bit of an expert on the application in that side of our business at Gustafson, and Gustafson went through a merger and a buyout, and I was severanced in 2002, but prior to that, I had started to get this love and interest in trade, right? And it's funny, at the time I thought every farm's key to success was agronomy, and then years later, when I went to the trade side of the business, I thought every farm's key to success is marketing, right? And both are actually important. And I've always considered myself an agronomist first, and it was probably 15 years that I was worked in the trade before I considered myself more of a trader than an agronomist. And Lloyd gave me that love and interest in the global markets for product. So we had the Crow benefit payout, or at the end of the Crow benefit, I honestly can't remember if there was a payout or not, but there was a lot of companies, a lot of groups of farmers. I think there was like 18 in Saskatchewan alone that all wanted to build processing facility. Right. So there was a group in Kindersley that was interested in putting up a splitting plant. So and I was still working at Gustafson, and again, more and more interested in the trade side. And so they'd asked me to come to a meeting. And, it was late 99, 2000, somewhere in there. And so this group wanted to build a red lentil splitting facility. Most people were focused on chickpea facilities because our acreage ramped from 100,000 acres, or not even 50,000 acres when I started my career in 96, all the way up to 1 million acres by 98-ish. I think 98 was about the peak, or maybe it was 1.2 million acres even. And, I was starting to get tired of the kind of corporate side of my life. And, I don't always fit real well with structure. And, like I said, it's the entrepreneur in me. Yeah. And, I remember writing a few emails where, and looking back, I probably would have been a little less brash considering my experience level at the time. But, that company ended up getting taken over by Bayer. And, I was severanced out, but I'd started getting involved with this group in Kindersley, and we eventually became Canpulse. It was about 50 farmers. And, I was on the board, and I went to the first meeting, and I said, this is a great idea. Let's look at this. I really didn't know anything about red lentil splitting. I knew nothing, actually. And I was more interested in chickpeas. And, and I started to talk to them about it. And I said, let's look seriously at this, but let's look at building this facility in Saskatoon. And the reason was it was pickup and delivery, P&D. It was the cost of moving a container from a rural location into CN or CP container yards here in Saskatoon. And I think some people left the meeting thinking, no, we want to build this here. We want jobs for our community. And there's something to that, but there was an sound economical reason for building the splitting facility in Saskatoon. So eventually the group kind of agreed with me, and we bought land in the city. And then in 2001 we had a serious drought. 2001, 2002, and we weren't able to raise the capital required. We had a Turkish partner, splitting partner in Mersin, and he ended up in some legal issues. There's an entire episode on that whole saga, but we ended up going ahead and we bought a satellite location in Kindersley from AgPro, which was actually an all-state. You talk about Reinhold Nunweiler, and who was kind of one of the pioneers of canary seed production in Canada, and he had actually ownership at one time, and that asset sold in to Viterra under the AgPro banner, and we bought that facility for $200,000. $200,000, yeah. And I've seen some cheap locations, cheap asset sales, but that was the cheapest, obviously. And I showed up there, and everybody was kind of looking at me like, well, so let me back up. I happened to get severance out of the business, and at Gustafson, I wanted to end up in the trade, and so I ended up taking over the role of general manager of the company, right? And so in the first year we shipped, 7 or 8 or 10,000 tons of canary seed and lentils. And I thought we could never do more than that. A decade later, we shipped 95,000 tons through that facility, but we did a lot of projects. We did a lot of expansion and, built the company up.
So what'd you grow it from? 8,000?
From about 8,000 the first year to about 95 was our peak, or 96,000.
12x, eh?
Yeah.
Wow.
But there was a lot of red lentil production and in some of those years, and people shifted out of chickpeas into more reds, more green lentils. And then we had a canary seed cleaning line, which was, kind of a critical part of our company. And that was the first crop that I exported myself. We were a toll processor on the lentils, and we were shipping canary to our own buyers, around the world. And that was, 23 years ago or so, I started trading canary.
23 years, eh?
Yeah, it's a long time. I can't get over it. I mean, when I started, I was by far the youngest person in the industry.
Yeah.
And, now I am by far near the near the oldest in some of these crops, especially canary seeds, right? Like, it's just been, it's amazing how time flies, and turn around a couple times, another year goes by, and
yeah. So. Well, it's interesting that your canary seed story, and again, Reinhold's farm was 1.5 miles west of where I grew up.
Right.
1.5 miles east. And
did your dad unload the first bags of canary seed that came in?
That's the story, yeah. He's working for Reinhold. Reinhold had a trucking company at the time. And he asked, Steve, can you go and unload that bag? And the bags of canary seed in the back. I'm like, from the trunk of the car. And he had borrowed the car from one of the cooks to drive down. I thought it was Texas. And anyways, came back with his bags of canary seed, and what do you use canary seed for? You feed it to canaries, is what Reinhold. Right. That's the story, right? So
I often have people say, well, what's canary seed used for?
Yeah.
Well, to feed canaries, right?
Well, in stories, I'll have to get some guys on here to talk about this, but so they didn't know what to do with this, did not know how to combine it. So when the stories is when they first started combining it, they thrashed it, and they had all these black seeds.
Yeah, dehulled
seeds. They thought they did a hell of a job.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, the birds don't eat it, right?
Yeah.
And then, so they were out there, but prior to that, they had plastic jugs, and they had slits cut in them, and they're just trying to think how they're going to, I don't know. They're just again, little earlier than we were trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Trying to roast chickpeas in my mom's kitchen, trying to figure out what do you do with these things, right?
Right.
They were out there trying to figure out this with canary seed.
Yeah. So, and even all that work was kind of done by the time we come along on canary seed, right? But yeah, canary seed has, very kind of, I mean, a little background on canary seed, and like I literally talk about this for hours, but as the Spaniards conquered Latin America, they brought this desire to have a canary seed in their home. So canary seed comes from the islands off the coast of Spain, right? So somehow that seed made it from Spain, probably into Mexico or southern U.S., and was being produced there for those birds in Mexico. And Mexico is still the largest demand sink for canary seed in the world. It's about 25% of our demand.
Really?
Yeah. So that makes sense that product was coming up from Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So red lentils splitting red lentil plant, canary seed plant.
Yeah. So we developed the plans to put the splitting asset in Saskatoon. We had a couple bad droughts. We decided to shelve the project and focus what equity we did have in the Kindersley facility. So I was there for about 15 years, I guess. And then we had a shareholder pass away. We had another one with an illness, and we decided, maybe it's time to wrap this company up, right? And find a buyer. And we ended up selling that company to Globeways in Toronto, and still a close friend and current partner named Rajesh Jain. And him and I had a Turkish partner in Dubai and another partner in Toronto named Tanvir. And so we went on to run that company, and I stayed there until about 2019. We bought the asset in Zealandia, which weirdly we now own again. And then we bought an asset in south of LaJord called Vigro. And so we ran those three facilities, handling canary seed and lentils and peas. And then I left in 19 and went to work for another company, and then they had some issues a year ago, and then moved on to this Harvest Grain Group. And we had bought a facility in Fillmore called Born Horse Seeds, and that's kind of what we operate under. We're in the process of changing that, but and then we bought Zealandia and Fillmore. So kind of full circle back to doing what I was doing before.
Yeah,
so.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I still farm with my brother. I'm married here in Saskatoon. My wife Sherry and I have been, married for 5.5 years, and it's a busy life, but I wouldn't have it any other way, I guess.
Yeah, you're busy. I know that much.
Yeah, and some days I don't know how. I'm finally learning to say no when somebody says, I got this idea. And I'm kind of learning, right? So, and I remember seeing another person, and I won't mention his name, but he was super innovative and really looking for the next thing. And I'm thinking about growing canola next year, and I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm going to have to learn a bunch of stuff that I don't know today. And so, I'm getting less innovative, and, finally hired somebody to help with some of the agronomy on the farm, and, and realizing that at some point it's got to slow down a bit. Right?
I think it's probably a good idea. But you want to quit learning. Once you stop being curious, you get old, I believe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I got lots of learning in my current work, though. I mean, that's the one thing I love about the special crop industry is every day you get up, something may or may not have changed in the markets. Right. And there's, you talk about chickpeas, something that I have the least experience in. I mean, there's a new chickpea crop every couple months in the world, right? So things are constantly changing and evolving in that market. But even something like red lentils, like through much of my career, we only, Australia produced a small amount of product, and we had them as a competitor for 6 weeks in Christmas, January, and they were out, and now we've got red lentils coming out of Australia. We've, big tonnage, more tonnage than we produce. in Canada, and we've got Kazakhstan, and we got Russia and Ukraine, and all the war issues in Ukraine have really rocked markets at times, and weakened markets at times too. Like, it's a very interesting world.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Yeah, so there's no shortage of learning.
Yeah, there's always something, right?
Yeah.
A crisis somewhere, or rainfall somewhere. Or,
Yeah. No, it's something new every day. Tariffs, American tariffs, which, don't impact a lot of my business. It might affect the Durham market some, but, it's kind of a redistribution of product. But it is pushing some customers around the world towards Canada, which is positive, right? Yeah, there's a lot of things, a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely. Managing a startup. I give kudos to anybody who starts anything from scratch. Like it is so difficult at so many different levels.
Yeah.
So you've done that a few times, right? So you're doing one right now. But let's start with back at Canpulse days. What was you grew at 12.5 times. Sounds nothing but glory, but I mean.
Yeah, we had quite a hockey stick of growth there in the first decade at Canpulse. And, we started with I think it was a 5-car rail spot. And then we went to 10 cars and 15 and 25. And, we just, constantly trying to expand the operation. And, some years, we made money, and some years we broke even. And it was, but business was more simple then. Right? We didn't have as many competitive influences. Today, the Canadian special crop trade is highly competitive, highly anticipatory, so to speak, meaning constantly anticipating where the market is moving, as opposed to in those earlier days, the market was more, here's the cost of the grower, here's the cost of processing, and here's the cost of our sale, right? It was a simpler industry. We had to find technology that would speed up our processes and do more with less people. And eventually we couldn't find enough people. And that's how I ended up moving to Saskatoon. We just needed more people in our office, right? Yeah. And Kindersley, it's no secret, it's a very difficult place to hire people. The oil industry is strong. And, so there was a lot of challenges. One of the key things for growth in that group was there's no other key item. The key item was we brought in 6 foreign workers, right? Yeah. And that kickstarted. That moved us from about 60,000 tons annually to 95,000 tons. Really, with it was foreign worker program. Purely foreign worker program, and a couple of those guys still work with us today, and that's that they were really, really required to move the business forward. And it's all about people. If the guy isn't dumping the truck or cleaning the grain or grading the grain or paying the grower or trading the grain, the business does nothing, right? So I guess most businesses are like this, but we're very required on, our requirement is strong staff. Yeah. Right. And which is a challenge. It doesn't feel like we have enough people still in this province, right? And it's a constant fight, to get staff. So, without the foreign worker program, what would have happened? What would that business? I don't think that business would have survived because it just couldn't grow. We just didn't have the ability to grow the business. Wow. And profits per ton were look at the grain industry, 2013, 2014, there was a lot of profit in the Canadian grain industry. Everybody put that into more infrastructure and more assets. And now we have a situation like Northwest Terminals who isn't even operating. Right. And grain companies' margins are extremely tight. Yeah. To the point where it's almost, that they're having difficulty staying alive, right? Yeah. So, and there's other examples in the Canadian industry. In 2005 or so, there was a number of those farm groups went into bankruptcy. Yeah. And, those facilities were torn down, sold off by piece by auction. And we haven't had that in the grain industry this time. the price of the asset gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but we haven't seen anything, dismantled. And the industry really needs some facilities to go away.
And what would be the catalyst for that, do you think? Outside of the profit margins, but like, is there anything that might foresee that happening? Or?
Well, the industry's changed too, and there's more shipments gone to bulk conventional. So, some of that business has moved to the line companies out of the, the smaller, more mom and pop type businesses like we run. So I don't know what changes it, but we definitely have too much capacity in the Canadian grain industry. Port, and in the port, the G3 group built a massive facility in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And so there is tons of export capacity now. And so we either need a bigger crop or we need less assets. So I'm not sure either is going to happen.
Wow. So, challenging the business. Running my own businesses, I always struggled with money going out at a faster pace than it came in. My people, my staff, my previous business needed to get paid.
Yeah.
They got paid, but I wouldn't get paid for 60, 90, sometimes 180 days, right?
Right.
How do you manage, that's got to, you guys are paying growers. I know you're paying growers quicker, faster than you get paid. How does?
Yeah, it's all about lines of credit and that's one of the things we've gone through with this new group is ramping up lines of credit. Banks don't give you more money than you need. You got to keep showing them that you need more.
Yeah.
Right. We have insured receivables. So EDC has a program that says, if this buyer defaults, you're paid this money, et cetera. And we had to utilize that with China, the Chinese tariffs. So that product got to China and they didn't accept the goods, right? So then it has to be moved to another destination. And then EDC kind of covers the spread between those, covers the losses, so to speak. So that's required and most grain companies in Canada have that insurance. And, so you use that against your ABL lines or asset-based lending lines and the bank gives you money based on those guarantees by the insurance. But cash flow is a constant problem.
Yeah.
And as we move to 50 and 60 cent lentils, the buyers in Mexico or in Peru or in Brazil or in, Turkey, they're also smaller business. They're not big multinational companies.
Right.
So instead of $500 a ton US delivered to their port, it's $1,000 a ton. So they're trying to ramp their lines up too. Everybody's trying to do the same thing, but there's just not enough capital in the industry when prices get to where they've gotten. So yeah, that's a constant fight. It's 25 years almost of chasing money every day.
I remember, you don't have to get into it. I just remember you sharing stories about, back in Canpulse days and, we have no idea. We, as outside the business, and we shouldn't, but we have no idea what that looks like. Right.
Yeah.
It's just a constant fight.
Canpulse was doing upwards of 120 million in sales with a $4 million operating line. So, yeah, there was days where you're literally begging this guy to pay you early or that guy to pay you early or, and you talk about not getting paid. And, personally, I've had a lot of my family's grain go into the company and we might not get paid until 120 days or 180 days after delivery because you're fighting to keep everybody else happy. Right. Yeah. And, so, that's, and we've had growers help us with some of those things too. And, the bond is there for a reason. But even the bond is expensive, right? The Canadian Grain Commission bonding requirements are another hurdle in the industry, right? And if you're a shoe store and you're selling shoes or you're distributing shoes to other shoe stores, there's no government agency guarantees your payment by your customer, right?
Right.
And whereas in the grain industry, we have that added expense. Our company could cost $120,000 a year just to cover that requirement, and for good reason. There's been a few bankruptcies in the Canadian trade, and the growers have done well, mainly done fairly well with that bonding.
Yeah, it's a nice service at an environmental consulting company, years ago, and I don't know, small business, one-man operation. Well, it wasn't one man, but one owner, and we didn't have that bonding in there. I wrote off, I don't think we got somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000.
Right.
Yeah, because people just refused to pay, and or went out of business or disappeared, and
Yeah, and knock on wood, through most of my career, I've seen very few real defaults. I've seen 2 or 3 in my whole career.
Yeah.
Where people just didn't pay us, for the most part. And they do that for a reason, because if they lose their ability to be insured by EDC, they lose their ability to buy grain from Canada.
Oh, I see. So
right?
It works on both sides, doesn't it? Yeah.
So at times, the threat of being reported for non-payment could stop the flow of goods from Canada.
Interesting.
So there's only, like I said, it's only a handful of times where we've had a really significant loss, right? Yeah. I've never had a loss in the Mexican market. That's one of our key markets in my whole career, right? And just try and deal with more good people, and if sometimes there's a guy that wants to pay way more than the market, it's probably a sign that you're going to have a problem with that guy, right? Right. So, every day somebody's calling me looking for grain that I don't know who they are. And, there's a pretty good chance I don't even return their call, right? Yeah. So it's all about risk mitigation. So
right.
You start looking for Hotmail accounts. Anybody that emails you with a Hotmail account is a you delete that right away. So
Hotmail, Yahoo, right?
Yeah.
They're too old. They're not gonna might not be around long enough
to receive the goods, let alone pay for them.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, business is tough. So then, just use your own judgment how far you want to get into this. But you started your own company, and previous one there was a fallout there, right? Or not a fallout, I guess. That's not the right term. It's the wrong term to use because it looks like it's painting you as having the fallout, but it wasn't you having the fallout.
Yeah, I was an employee. There was circumstances that led to the Grain Commission pulling the bond, right? And that company had a lot of potential, and it's unfortunate, but you got to kind of pick up, move forward, and that's what we had to do as employees, and so I've had several startups, whether they're location startups or business startups, right? And the last fall, we started this group had to kind of formulate it together. I think one of the things I've learned in this round is having partners with broad experience. It's always nice to own 100% of something, but sometimes owning less of something, it means more in the end.
Smaller piece of a bigger pie.
Yeah. There's issues that we have in our current group. We've got people that, just know this stuff, other partners, and, they manage them, and because it's their company too, right? So we've really got a experienced group of people behind us now. And that's the best part of this startup versus some of the other ones that I've been involved in. So I'd like to think that this is my last, and so pretty sure it will be.
Yeah, well, not many of your friends would take Bill on that one. You're still too young. So your partners now and your team you have been with you for a lot of years. So you got Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy and I have worked together since the first day. I mean, she can finish my sentences, and she really knows her role. Inventory management is a critical component of this type of business. I guess it is in everyone, but especially in this business. And there's a lot of balls in the air, and you're keeping them upright. And so her and I have worked together a long time. Ray and I, you introduced me to Ray, and Ray was one of the reasons I wanted my office in Saskatoon. Extremely effective individual, and I think I'm wildly guessing it's about 12 or 13 years we've worked together.
Long, eh?
12, 13,
wow.
Wow. Raj and I have known each other for 20 years, and had a couple moments through the years where we weren't working together, but he's very involved on the finance side and trade side. And then Terry Arnold, who has been cleaning special crops for 25 years, very effective at facility management, it's a little bit on the OCD side. So, his attention to detail in our facilities is excellent. Yeah. And, so you put all those people together, and we also have Tia, who's a trader, and she understands things that I don't even try to understand with the Asian markets. And, you really got to lean on strong people. You don't need a huge number of people if they're effective and strong, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's impressive that you and Nancy have worked as long as you have together, and you've gone, she's come with you, right?
Yeah, she moved from Kindersley to Saskatoon, so she's in our office here, and I'm really thankful for a team of people that are working with us.
And did Terry come before Ray?
Terry came in, so in 2010 or 2011 we had the red lentil grading issues, and he came in as an SGS employee. So he was doing third-party grading in Kindersley for at least 8 or 10 years before, and then when things wrapped up, he became an employee. Okay. He was an employee under Purely in Kindersley, and then he became an owner of the current group.
Okay, good, yeah. It's funny how you mentioned Ray there, and my family we're down in Cuba.
Yeah.
And my oldest son, he wanted me to come out with him on the town, right? Still, I guess at that time young enough to feel like. Anyways, we're running through this resort, and it was after midnight. Ran into Ray in the lobby of our resort, and just seemed like a solid guy. Some of those decisions after 12 o'clock are sometimes good ones, right? Or some of the, and talked to him in the airport, and then I remember thinking, he's looking for a change of career, and I said, I just don't have a
role.
I don't know what I don't have a role, right?
And I had lost a logistics person in Kindersley, and you said, you should talk to this guy. So I had lunch with him, and Rebecca, who isn't with us now, but she was a really important part of that foreign worker program, and very key to the success of bringing those workers in, right? It doesn't work unless you manage it, and she managed it, right? And Rebecca said, I said, I hired this guy named Ray, and she says, oh, did you fill out this document or that document? And does he have a resume? And I said, no, I had lunch with him. I said, get him on payroll. And then I quickly, and he started really, he didn't have any knowledge of the industry.
No idea.
Nothing at all. Yeah. And
came from Meadow Lake or something.
Yeah. He was born in Lebanon and raised in Meadow Lake, and really took to it, understood it, and managed to be a self-learner, because I had forgotten most of what I learned at the start of my career, and had other people in that role, and had gotten really rusty, and he literally was looking up acronyms on the internet, trying to sort his way out on how to move product from here to Rotterdam, right? And so he's an integral part of the team.
Sharp guy. Yeah. So you got a good team around you, or with your partners, I guess, is what they are. A lot of them are. That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's been quite a ride. I mean, I remember in high school walking into the principal's office and saying, I'm dropping computer science. I don't need this. I'm going to be a farmer. Right. And literally I'm on a computer every day for hours. You know, of course, I don't know how to do a lot of things on that computer besides, use spreadsheets and different things. But I did not expect to kind of go down this path at all. Right?
No, and you've always been curious. I would say in our peer group, our age group, you're an early adopter of technology. Always have been. I remember you had the Palm Pilot thing. None of us knew what the hell that was. Right?
Yeah, Kyocera was my first smartphone.
Yeah,
I still have it actually. It was a flip phone, but it was Palm based.
Oh.
Right. So it was Palm based flip phone. It went out of business, obviously, and then I got a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And the BlackBerry was game changing too. That was one of those things like ChemFollow and direct seeding and GPS and BlackBerry. I mean, that was just one of those things that really shifted my abilities to manage more.
I remember sitting down at the landing and we were able to pull up the weather on our phones, and not everybody had that ability at that time.
Yeah. Now it's like, somebody was telling me what wind service to use and what app to use. And I was like, but back then you had this horrible graphics but you could tell when rain was coming at you. In some sense, that system was better than the one we have today for radar and rain. But all those pieces of technology are critical, right? To continue to adopt. And you're right. If you stop learning that stuff, like I refuse to get one more social media app. I'm tapped out here. I just don't have it in me to learn another one. But you got to keep learning and keep moving forward and adopting those technologies, or your competitor will.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah, you got to. Those technologies just increase our efficiencies to another level, and then now we got artificial intelligence. It's just a game changer in my professional and personal life. It's just absolutely amazing what it does on that.
Some of the pioneers in our special crop industry talk about they would have a women in the Vancouver office, and their job was to type out these telex messages, and that telex would go to the buyer, and he would get it. And then he would respond, and a few days later, somebody else would respond. And deals took weeks to put together. Now they take literally minutes, right?
Yeah. Digital signature. You guys use digital signatures and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, and they're like WhatsApp. I mean, you can be talking to, on the way here today, I talked to a person in France and a person in Italy before I even got to your office, right? It's just instant communication. And I have a friend that tells a really cool story about mustard. He was a mustard trader and became an important broker to our company, or to my career. And his name is Doug. And he was talking about this mustard deal. And he took a train through Russia to see the mustard, and then took a train home, flew back to Canada, made a deal to sell it. It was weeks of work.
Yeah.
But there was no... there was a lot of margin in the business because there was no knowledge about what was going on in the world. And so, those things have been really stripped away. The faster the technology gets and the communication gets, the quicker these markets move. All right. So if you're not in the communication, if you're not in that groove, you're not gonna make it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's critical.
Well, I just think, to that point, I used, as an anti-weed board monopoly guy back in the day, because it didn't serve me as a young farmer. So but the internet came out, and I remember I could wake up in the morning and essentially see what the price of wheat was either that day or the previous day anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And that was a new development.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the coffee shop and having breakfast with the older guys, and of course, they weren't adopting the technology like I was, but now it's almost instantaneous, right? You go on Twitter or X and you'll have the news like right now.
Yeah.
If people are willing to share it.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much in the grain business, but.
Yeah. It's fast. I mean, and that's what this on the special crop side, we don't have a futures market. All we have is communications and who traded what was the price, what's the direction, what's the trend of these markets. So you really feel the market, right? It just kind of becomes part of your day every day. And so, I mean, one of the, and I wouldn't say frustration is not the right verbiage, but is we can feel in some sense which direction things are going if you're that active all day every day, right? And unfortunately the farmer can't feel that, so he's making decisions based on 10 or 15% of the information that you have, right? So sometimes things are very clear to me. We've got a few of these coming up here, this fall in our grain markets. As long as we continue getting rain, et cetera. There's always a caveat, but the volume of information. I remember early it was Johnston's. Ellen Johnston had the AJ bat. It was a list of trades, right? And you could, of course, printed it out, and I can still see those things in binders. But that was kind of the early start of some of the communication. Shift. Price discovery, yeah. The price discovery is why people wanted a Canadian wheat board, right?
Yes.
But even fax was a technology shift, right? To be able to get prices weekly and there just was no reason to continue with a Canadian wheat board.
Yeah, and that was my point to those at breakfast there, Brady's Country Cafe, is that, I can get the price. I know what the prices are. I don't need to go to the elevator or the Canadian wheat board to tell me what they were, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a point there you made. And I tell the story quite often. And you and I have had that experience on our trips out to Kindersley, but I tell people that when I look at the markets from a technical point of view, using technical analysis, I've got enough hours, and I think now enough years that I'm kind of starting to feel things. You kind of feel where the market's going. And you and I have talked a number of times about currencies and even on specialty crops. What you're feeling or seeing in the market, just because of your years of experience, is very technical.
Right.
You've shared with me a few times when you've taken positions on the currency, and they're like, hey, that's extremely technical. You're not looking at it, but it's interesting how it lines up.
Yeah, and when you started down this road, I didn't know much about technical analysis. I thought, hey, that's for corn. I understood that some of the big board crops were, or the big futures traded crops, that this was an advantage, right? But it was the Canary seed market hit 55 to 57 cents. I was looking at it from, there's too many trucks coming to town. I'm getting too many people selling. And you were seeing similar things in the numbers, right? I've told a number of people that. And that's what shifted me from thinking, I'm not sure this can work in smaller crops, to, there's something here, right? And timelines are always the key. We can always be, well, you can almost be 100% certain you're going to be right in the long term if your long term's long enough, right? And so sometimes the timing of these things don't always line up the way a guy thinks. But that was the fall of 21 when Canary dropped from 57 to maybe 47 inside of a few weeks.
And you could feel a shift, and whether it's counting the trucks or.
And the buyers can feel this stuff too, because some of these people have been buying Canary seed a lot longer than I've been around, right? Yeah. And I have customers that have way more experience than I do, and they can feel when their phone's starting to light up just a little too much, right? And then they start to back off. That's really what's happened in our green lentil market right now, is the buyers are sensing too many people wanting to make sales, and and then it just dries up. The demand dries up, and down we come, and it shoots too far too, right? But it's these are all very interesting parts of what my career has turned into, and I always thought that I would probably maintain more of an understanding and possibly go back to the chemical industry at some point, right? And you seem surprised a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, there was a long time there where I kind of missed that part of my career, right?
Oh yeah.
And even retail, I've considered retail pretty much stuck here, and that's a rider out now. So I'm 54 here now, which just completely shocks me. But another 10 years or so, or 15 years. So
And thinking about, you're 54, I'm 53. It's hard to believe, really. Like, this used to be old.
yeah, I know that.
And
I know.
I'm not ready to give up or pack it in or slow down. I'm just starting to, I think I'm starting to be able to capitalize, I guess, on all the
work.
all the work that's been done the last 30 years,
Yeah. I think that's very typical of a lot of career paths, right? The first 20, 30 years are more about learning what to do. In the last 10, 15 years, or, there's lots of people in our business globally that are in their 70s or even their 80s that are still active and learning, and, and so, age is a whole nother topic, but, I mean, it does, 50 is the new 30 type of thing, right? I don't feel 54. When my dad was 54, he had a much different lifestyle than I have.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Much different.
He's not snowmobiling.
Yeah, no, I mean, my wife and I spend a lot of time in the north on snowmobiles, and, he wouldn't have been doing that at that age, right? He had some back issues, a little different, but, things have changed.
Yeah, different lifestyle. So there's a narrative about grain buyers and suppliers in the business, and I don't think they're fair.
Right.
And I hear this all the time on the marketing side of things, that they know where the market's going. That's why they're, with their grain company putting out their special that morning, right? It's a different special than yesterday's special, right? Or whatever. And I actually don't think it's that black and white.
No. I mean, especially half the specials are probably specials at prices they're losing money at, right? Half the specials are probably at a value that they're making money at, right? I mean, the reason the companies have gone to these specials or put in targets and those sorts of things is to just increase the total volumes, right? So they're speculating on transportation, right? They've got unit trains coming in, they got vessels coming in. The job of the trade is to provide liquidity. It's not just to sell a pound of durum wheat every time they buy a pound of durum wheat. You can't operate in that kind of environment. So there is a level of speculation that occurs in every grain industry, right? Yeah. But I'll guarantee you half of those are losers and half of them are winners, right? And somewhere in there's some kind of margin that comes out the other side. I've had those things on grading. I haven't had a lot of grading disputes. I mean, the reason I got into the special crop trade, one of the issues was chickpea sizing.
Yeah.
You and I had a sale. So this is back in 97, I'm going to guess. We felt that the sizing was way out to lunch compared to the sample that we had given. And at that point, I decided I was already headed towards the grain industry. And I said that, we were going to treat growers fairly. And, and that was the whole purpose behind having SGS in our location. Was somebody else did the grading, and, and I'm always happy if somebody says, I don't believe this value, we'll send it to the Grain Commission, right? And we'll live and die by that. And I've seen half the time the dockage comes up higher when we send it to the Grain Commission, half the time it comes up lower. It just is what it is. We've got way too many other things to worry about than trying to steal a percentage of a grower's grain, right? Yeah. Our focus is more about what's the volume, what's the big picture, and there's a lot of mistrust. People think you doctor samples. I couldn't imagine a situation where I go to one of our staff members and said, just put in 3% more weed seeds, clean it out of this other sample, put it in there. I mean, I would lose all credibility I have with those stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so that one gets me when people think that we can actually do those things and maintain some reasonable level of respect from our staff. Right.
You go to the, and I went to this environmental consulting company too. I never asked them to sweep anything under the rug. They found it, report it.
Right. And deal with it.
Because you go to this effort to hire great people, and then you're going to ask them to compromise their values and lie, and they're not going to work for you. And you're not going to have good. You never have good people after that. So.
Yeah. No, you just simply can't. And the companies that, I won't say there isn't some of that happens out there, but those employees leave those companies, then they go to different companies, and then all of a sudden the stories start to flow out. Right. So there's a very fine line on that stuff that I've walked through my career. I've been disappointed with results and product that I shipped other locations, and, I get it, but, if you're dealing with reputable people, I think you don't have a lot to be concerned about.
No, I agree with you. Trust is,
it's paramount.
Yeah.
And we have buyers that have claims, right? And our job in the special crop trader, my career has been merging these cultural differences between different regions, right? And they have a different view of business and business ethics than we do. And theirs isn't necessarily wrong. That's what that country developed their business structure under for hundreds of years. Yeah. I know one guy who talks about his family being in trade for 300 years. Wow. Right. And so, and some customers, if they come to me with a claim, I don't doubt it. I just say, okay, how do we make this right? And we provide the discount. Sometimes we have to send SGS into those locations though and test the grain and then determine whether or not there's a real claim. Yeah. Sometimes there isn't, but that's our role.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I've learned to think and react less over time. That's the one thing I'm getting better at is not reacting quickly on issues. And I can't always say I'm perfect on that, but I'm better than I was 20 years ago.
You mean reacting as a immediate overreaction or anger or
with a conflict. Yeah.
Conflict, yeah.
Right. I'll let stuff sit for a few days or even a week before I, really start to think about it. And, we make mistakes in our business too. But once you realize you've made the mistake, you just fix it and you get on with your life. Yeah. Right. And I think that's a critical issue that some people can't do. They fall in love with their side of something and can't admit that they're wrong. Right. Yeah. And I'm wrong lots. Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. That comes with age. I think I'm wrong lots. The key is to be able to acknowledge it and accept it and learn from it. Right. I say the older I get, the less I know, because I had really strong opinions on a lot of subjects in my 20s and early 30s. And now I question it, whether I even actually believe that anymore.
I'm getting stronger in some of my opinions about some topics, and sometimes I should just stay out of it.
It's a challenge, right? Yeah. I can't say I'm immune to it, but it's something I'm working on. Another thing, when a company has financial troubles, with the recent struggles at your previous employer, and you were affected as a farmer yourself, weren't you?
Yeah, actually, I had the largest claim with the CGC in the history of failures. And, we had delivered all of our maple peas, all of our lentils last fall. And literally a few days later, the bond was pulled, right? Yeah. I knew the bond was large enough to cover everybody, but we didn't expect that. And the people internally in that company did not expect that to happen. That's the truth. There's no other way around that, right? So yeah, we were definitely impacted. And then, then we had a large check, it's public information, $1.55 million. I got stuck in the Canada Post strike. So then we go to the Grain Commission and said, well, can you wire us this money? Can you cancel that check and wire us this money? Yep. So they said, okay, we're going to send you $1. Let us know when you receive the $1. So we received the $1. And then 3 weeks or a few days later, we say, okay, where's the other 1.55 million? And they're like, oh, we got a banking issue. We've never done a transfer that large.
Yeah.
And it's a banking issue. They had to go to their bank, which I thought was the Bank of Canada. Maybe I don't completely understand the structure of the Bank of Canada versus our, the RBCs and Scotia's BMOs. But
it probably is one of the big five, isn't it? Or?
I guess it must be. But, if you get a check from the government, it says Bank of Canada on it, doesn't it? I don't even look that closely. I don't get any checks from them anymore. But
that's a good point. I don't know.
So anyway, they had to make arrangements and change their limits. And then finally we got the funds in mid-December. So yeah, put a little pressure on things, but yeah, it all got resolved in the end. And, but so yeah, I was, last fall I was dealing with that, and I was dealing with the fact that we were having to wind up our shipments, and we had product all over the world.
Yeah. You worked through that, didn't you? You stuck around and worked through that.
Yeah. At times I, just didn't sleep really. Like there was a lot of work had to be done. And
40, how long, you told me one time how long you
48 hours I worked for straight. Finally my wife picked me up and not dragged me, but took me to Candle Lake. So I had to actually sleep. But we had so many questions from so many people globally, and they're all on different time zones, wondering what was happening. And, we didn't know either. But we got through it, and then, we had to transition into the new company.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of balls in the air. I've never had so many things happen in such a short period of time. And then we bought the Zealandia facility in December, January, from the GFI bankruptcy, and I owned that facility in the past, so I knew it. So there, we didn't have to think too much about it because we knew what it could do. And, but between all the different things and hiring people and staff and office I've never been through something like that.
Yeah, so. We talked quite a bit during that time. You were, I could tell you were, you're burning the candle at both ends. There.
Sherry said, "Oh, let's go to Shakespeare on this. Not Shakespeare on this. We're going to go on this river cruise."
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I said, "Oh, I'm thinking, holy cow, river cruise right now." And so I'm standing there on the dock working on a logo design with the designer, talking to him on the phone and trying to work. I look up and you and Michelle are standing there, and I'm thinking, oh, we just happened to run. I was just confused why you were there. Here she had asked you guys to meet us there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm talking, I talk fast normally, but I was talking a mile a minute when, so many things and thoughts going through my head, right?
Yeah.
A year later, it's not quite a year even, but yeah, all that stuff is slowed right down, and, we're into a normal day-to-day business stuff now, and yeah, it's better.
Yeah,
so
that's good. Yeah. Well, so, okay. Harvest Grain, you guys got facilities, just to recap on what new facilities are.
Yeah. So we're in Zealandia. So we have Born Horse Seeds in St. Gregor. So that's the operating name we're under today. That's transitioning to Harvest Grain Trading. And then we have Zealandia we wholly own, and we had Fillmore that we wholly own. Fillmore is called Harvest Grain Milling. Eventually that'll be changed to Harvest Grain, but the company's operating solely under the Harvest Grain banner. Okay. And it's one group, and we're a very local group of people. we have full control, and and I think that's probably key for the growers. We're moving along. We're looking at a big program in the fall. So we've been selling new crop for 6 months at least. So we have a significant new crop position to execute in August, September, October, and there's some tough spots in the province for moisture, but there's also some really good crops coming too in parts of the province. Yeah. And so I'm kind of anticipating an average crop for the crops we trade, and I think it should be a pretty good year here.
Yeah.
So a little tighter financially, but hopefully the yields offset some of the loss in grain value.
Yeah. Interesting. So at the end, we'll let you share how everybody can find you and get a hold of you. But a few more minutes, a few questions. For someone wants to enter in the commodity space, special crop space, do you have any advice for them?
I have a lot of people, immigrate to Canada, and they've got a cousin or their family still in Pakistan or in Europe or wherever. And I sometimes have told people, are you sure you want to enter this? You sure you want to do this? And there's days where I say, if I realize just how much work this is for the return, would I do it again? Would I, going back to 2000, would I do all this over? And, there's some days I say, no, probably not. I was in university for 7 years. I could have been a lawyer or a doctor or a vet, but I don't think I had the aptitude to do those things.
Well, you probably had the aptitude.
Well, I didn't have the attitude. Let me put it that way. I was, a little too social, to say the least.
That's what university is about. It's about who you meet.
Yeah.
Get 3 letters behind your name and meet a bunch of people.
I mean, it's amazing what that time in university did for my career, right? I mean, I was talking to a guy that I went to Vocag with yesterday, and I hadn't talked to him for probably 2 years, and I just rung him up, and it was like we hadn't stopped. We talked every day since. We've been out of Vocag for 33 years or some crazy number, right? Amazing. Yeah, and so those connections are critical. But I mean, I still also love, this business, and I like the complexities of the special crop industry. I'm not sure I could go be a wheat trader somewhere, or a canola trader. I'm not sure that would really rock my boat, but the people I've met around the world are, second to none. Yeah. Right. I mean, and that's been a big influence on me. And I mean, I grew up pretty hillbilly-ish, not that my parents weren't bright, they were, but, a very small world.
Rural Saskatchewan. I grew up similar.
Yeah. And, and I was, my parents exposed me to some, pretty impressive people when I was young, and probably gave me some drive to kind of do something more, or not knocking, had I stayed at farmer and never went to university, I might be wealthier than I am today. But I've really met a lot of really interesting people that have really impacted me personally as an individual. And, there's nothing monetary there, but, critical part of my career. Yeah. So I would recommend it, but, there's easier ways to make money than this industry. Yeah. There really is. Right. So
it probably takes, there's things about it that you can't learn. You can't be taught.
Right.
You have to experience. And so in the trading business, stocks per se, or even commodities, it's 5 to 10 years is what they say. You're going to grind it out. You're going to hit rock bottom. You're going to question. You're going to go through highs and lows for 5 to 10 years before you really know your craft.
And I think there's other areas where people can probably ramp up their hourly salary, so to speak, quicker, right? than in this business, but it's definitely a long haul.
Yeah.
You know, so like I say, when I started, I was one of the younger people in the trade. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of those people have moved on or passed away, or some never stopped trading. I mean, they trade literally till they die. They're very similar to farmers. Yeah. Right? I have a number of customers that literally pass away at the helm of their company. You know, I guess that's the same as any industry, right? I think everybody's like that.
Yeah.
You know, so.
What about, well, you have two hats. You're a special crops trader and a farmer. There's always young farmers coming up.
Yeah, farming is that's a whole topic in itself. I mean, there's a lot of pressures on the profitability of these farms, right? You know, the land cost being a big part of it. But at the same time, land's never paid for itself. So there's a real, you gotta have a lot of hope there to throw down the money to expand farm operations. I see commodity pricing being weaker for some time, right? It just seems like there's too many pressures on the downside. And that whole rising tide lifts all boats. It's dropping all boats. You got 750 wheat and canola's been a bright spot. There's no question. I wouldn't have guessed that. That one, I'm definitely not a canola trader, and I don't even grow it. But yeah, I think there's going to be some pressures on agriculture, and the consumer is unrealistic about what he wants and isn't looking at the science of food production either. And that's a whole nother problem the industry has. And we're under that pressure constantly. Every time I turn around, somebody's asking for something that has less pesticides used or no Roundup. I mean, Roundup we know is a very safe compound, right? And the compounds we'll replace Roundup with are very toxic, whether you paraquat or diquat. Versus a Roundup, you know, we use diquat on a lot of our crops. Nobody's even talking about it. They're talking about glyphosate, which is less toxicity. Maybe glyphosate's a little more persistent. You know, but these lower courts make these rulings, and these rulings get on Facebook, and everybody's using that to form their opinions. I think that's a big negative of social media. Is that people are trying to get their science from these social media articles, and half of them are trying to sell this product or that product. There's a reason they're putting out these articles, is to try and persuade, you know, public perception of crop production. I mean, I haven't talked to Dennis Bellani for a long time since I was in the chemical industry, but he's written a really great book about this. I can't remember what the book's name is, but really interesting book about the safety of our food system. And it's very hard to get chemicals registered here. Yeah. It's very difficult. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, and the public just doesn't trust these agencies anymore. No. And so I think that's a big part of where farming that, you know, I think I'm going to miss that, but I think that is a huge part of the future of farming, is this public perception of food. Right. I mean, we've been consuming GMOs for 25 years in Canada.
Eat broccoli.
Europe, if I ship canary seed for their birds and they find some canola in, they have the ability to reject that product, and I have to bring it back to Canada. I might as well burn it, but have them burn it. But I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Yeah. And you know, so. But I highly recommend that book of his. I read it last winter.
Yeah, remember you invited me to his reading. I
didn't get to it, but I think I had the wrong day or something.
Yeah, we had intentions anyway. Yeah. What is something you believe today that you didn't believe growing up? What is something you believed when you were younger that you don't share that belief today? This is why you asked me some of the questions ahead, and I didn't tell you any of them. It's a tough one, but my beliefs have changed. I assume others have too.
Yeah, you know, I have some very strong beliefs about free trade, and that hasn't changed. Wow, that's a tough question.
Yeah, it can be like, it doesn't have to be business related. It can be personal related, personal beliefs. Yeah, like just like a basic one for me is just a simple like alcohol, right? Alcohol was so important to me with bonding and growing up, sign of adulthood, sign of manhood, that sort of thing. And I think it doesn't serve the same use case for me anymore, right? So I think it's a poison, right? So I don't have that belief anymore. That's maybe a real low level one, but I'm just trying to give an example, one that doesn't need to be about business or a chem fellow, or I could use my minimum tillage in the brown soil zone that's not feasible. Remember?
Did you say that?
No, but that was never a belief. I remember I did my thesis in that. I couldn't find any evidence that supported it. There's not enough evidence that supported increasing yields at that time. Yeah. So I had to do this damn thesis that way. But
my political beliefs have stayed pretty constant, pretty right wing. There's the whole climate change thing. I'm a little confused on. People look at, well, we've had 4 or 5 dry years in a row. It must be climate change. And I think, I've seen these periods in the past. And so I'm kind of really weird where I'm not sure about electric vehicles. You have a different view on that, right? And I seem to be buying bigger vehicles. Every time I buy a vehicle, it's a bigger vehicle with more horsepower that burns more fuel. Like I haven't really shifted. I probably will never buy an electric vehicle. I've the whole Trump thing, again, that's a whole nother podcast, but I think I've really become much more compassionate of people. And I think seeing what some of the things that are going on in the States is making me really a much more compassionate person to other people. Okay. I think that's a change that I've had. And that's definitely more recent. But growing up in rural Saskatchewan, we didn't understand other ethnicities, no, right? And I had a customer coming out to the farm to look, and I had to go tell my parents, okay, there's certain phrases and words you shouldn't use, and so there's a real core shift in my attitude around racism. That would probably be the number one for me. Is a real shift away from that kind of mentality that we grew up with, right?
Yeah, that would be a better example for mine too. I think back to what the beliefs I had growing up, and it's I'd say it's shameful, really. Yeah. But I really don't want to confuse nefariousness with ignorance. So.
Right.
And I think that was definitely ignorance.
Yeah, I've always said you can cure racism. If people get to know some of these people on a personal level that they supposedly hate, but they've never met one, from that region of the world, right? Yeah. And I because of most of our customers are from different parts of the world, I never ever really see ethnicity when I look at somebody. No. Saskatoon has a lot of problems, right? And social problems. It's a little different. But as far as people around the world, people are so the same, right? Yeah. I remember this one short story. I was in China on this, we ship peas to China for use in vermicelli noodles, right? And so pea starch is used in rice noodle production. A lot of people, including, people that eat a lot of rice noodles, don't even know that. But so we shipped this product there, and I was in China, and we were at these vermicelli factories, and the guy said, these young kids these days, they want to move to the city. They don't want to farm anymore. And it was like I was, sitting in rural Saskatchewan at that moment, right? It was just, people are so similar globally, right? They all have the same the same thing they're looking for, and, you know, whether they talk or dress or act a little different, they're all very similar people, right? That would be a core shift.
Yeah, you know, that's far more articulate response than my alcohol one. But yeah, that's been a huge shift for me too. Yeah. And it's interesting. I have two friends and live in Moscow.
Oh yeah.
And we chat. We're gonna chat with one a few days ago. I'll chat with one here, and you know, we're at war with them or something, right? These two guys, you know, speak multiple languages. They're educated, a higher level than I am, higher level intelligence. Their English is not their first language yet. They formulate sentence structures better than I do.
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah, and their interests, their desires, their beliefs are very much aligned with mine.
Right.
Yet they're Russian, right?
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I see people talk about. They'll say, "Oh, those damn Chinese and their tariffs." Well, it's you know, it's not this importer or that importer that has control of those things, and they have the same desire to import the product that we have to export the product. It's, you know, it's this government that's got involved, and that's where, I mean, that goes back to why I like the canary seed market. It's got very little government intervention, besides a couple trade issues with Mexico and that we went through in 2010. Morocco, there's a Brazil one, but for the most part, it's a very free market that's not influenced by government. But you get in some of these bigger grain markets, of course, politics is huge, right?
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, and I hear people say, "Oh, the Chinese canceled these grain shipments, canceled the contracts." How can they cancel the contracts? Well, they're reversing the futures position, right? Both parties. There's nothing nefarious about it. It's, you know, it's a decision that's made, and, you know, both parties, you know, will either win or lose, and they've come to that agreement. But it's not the country of China that did that, right? And so people start to forget that it's individuals that are involved in these transactions. It's not necessarily countries.
Yeah, unless it's the country itself buying it.
Yeah, yeah, and there's those state agency buying agencies. Those exist too. Yeah,
yeah, but it's not the country; it's individuals, like you say. Yeah,
yeah.
Interesting. Well, I enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was great.
This is good, and you're great at carrying. You know, you speak well, and it's great to have you on here.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing they pay me to do is speak. That's kind of all they pay me to do. That and text.
Yeah.
So,
if people want to get a hold of you,
yeah, we're here in Saskatoon on the North End. Harvest Grain is the banner. I'm always happy to, you know, to take a phone call and discuss the markets. And if I don't answer the phone, send me a text, and then I'm really good at replying, or the need to reply rattles around in my head for months. So eventually I make the call, but sometimes because I live on the phone all day, almost every day, I can't always answer the phone.
And you don't have voicemail.
And I do not have voicemail. I got rid of voicemail when Nancy and I started working together.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think that's tremendous.
That was the first thing I did, was I got rid of my voicemail.
And you just respond to it. You told me one time, I don't have voicemail, I just return every call.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I try and do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and or, you know, on text messaging, that's another huge shift.
Oh,
like
geez.
The volume of text messages that I make in a day is just astronomical.
Texting, you can text from your computer, WhatsApp, right?
And you wonder what's next. There's probably some new technology.
Well, I mean, what is it? Is it going to be a Neuralink thing where we just telepathically send our messages to
boy.
them?
I don't think I want anybody rattling around in my head. Yeah, they don't want to know.
No, that's right.
There's a lot of squirrel stuff goes on, and so.
The idea that someone can read my mind, I tell you, it frightens me.
Yeah.
All right, this has been great.
Thanks, Trent.
This is awesome. Thanks.